Bienvenue au French Tech Podcast. Welcome to the French Tech Podcast. Very happy to introduce Ben Moreau from Experian here with me at Big Data World Singapore. Could I ask you to introduce yourself, Ben?
Sure. So Ben Moreau, I lead the regional innovation team. So I'm the Innovation and Strategy Director inside, an innovation center of excellence that we call X Labs at Experian. So Experian has a series of markets across APAC, but we are a central APAC team. So we're not affiliated with any one market. We are a central set of capability that they leverage, and we build products and solutions for. Experian broader is a global company. Most well known in the US and the UK as being the main credit bureau. So we have revenues of around sort of $5 billion a year, which about half of that comes out of the US. APAC is a younger market for us, so we're about $200 million or so in APAC, and we are broader than just a credit bureau as well. So we do financial services, software, analytics services, and we've actually much more diverse in financial services in more recent times. We move into things like retail and insurance as well.
Interesting. So when you say credit bureau, just for the people at home who might not necessarily know what that means, it means you help credit institutions make decisions on whether or not to attribute lines of credit.
So basically a credit bureau is a secure database that holds bank cooperative data. So they will put their data in. We then assess an individual based on the different profiles they have across a bank. When an individual then applies for a loan at a bank, we will compile that data, put some analytics, and pass a score to the bank so they can help make a decision. Because you might apply to a bank, that bank has never seen you before, they don't know whether they should give you a loan or not. They ping the bureau will pass them back a score, which is typically between sort of 300 and 850, and the bank will make a decision based on that score plus some other data that they might be able to get from elsewhere or might already have on you as to whether they give you that loan or not, and as to how much as well. So it's something that's prominent in most Western markets, and most adults are on the credit bureau in some sense in Western markets, but when you move into APAC, very different story. So take Indonesia, for example. It's probably only about 15% of the adults are actually in the bureau, and the actual information within those is extremely light. So a very different set of challenges that we face in a lot of markets that aren't mature, sort of Western-style markets.
So many challenges, but also many opportunities, I presume. What's one opportunity that you're really excited about today?
So one that we're working on currently, which is really exciting for many reasons. One is it's a very worthy one. So we have a very big financial inclusion mission, and by that I mean thinking back to those people that aren't on the bureau. How do you bring them into formal finance when the standard route to do so is absent? And getting a little bit more specific, there are 450 million smallholder farmers in APAC. Which is 80% of the global small farmers. And by smallholder farmers, I mean they've got about 2 football pitches worth of land.
Right.
So it's not industrial. They usually have a few people working the land. Most of it is they use for their own subsistence, for their own consumption. But they're obviously looking to sell that to make money as well. And it's very, as you can guess by climate change particularly, they're very much at the mercy of the weather and pests and so on. So, and for them to actually access security through finance, some loans, so they can actually invest in pesticides, agricultural machines, new crops. They need some money, and also security through things like insurance. Should they have a bad year, how do they protect and secure their family against that? So it's exciting because it's a very worthy project against a very Asian segment of the population. So about 90% of the total smallholder farmer globally is actually within Asia. So it's very APAC specific, as well as the type of solutions we're looking at to try and combat that. So you talk about credit bureaus and credit data, not the most sexy, exciting information to most people. But when you start talking like satellite data and remote sensing and potentially using some of those images to understand what crop a farm is growing and what is the soil health of that farm, and is it likely to have a good crop this year, it's exciting, right? So we've got a data science team within the X Lab. They'll be the ones that do all the smart work, try and interpret those images and translate that into something that a bank or an insurer would understand, which is usually a score. So it's a very interesting project, really exciting, huge. so quite daunting in that respect. But something that, it's very, very, very interesting, exciting to work on and to learn more about as well.
Very interesting challenge, and very interesting to see that the way these kinds of decisions are made here in APAC is completely different from the way they're made in the West, obviously, because we don't have access to the same kinds of data on these individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. And alongside that, it's still very much so a very manual process. So a lot of people like us don't really see it. We apply for a loan online, and you can get your credit card arrives in the post in a few days' time. For the farmers in, say, India or Indonesia and China, they've got to get access manually. They've got to go to a branch in most cases and actually put in an application. That's quite often not that simple. And then secondly, on the bank side, they've got to go and validate a whole load of information. So then they've got to send someone to this farm to try and work out what crop are they growing. Is this going to be a risky one or not? Are they?
Right.
Do they actually live at this address? So a lot of countries don't have formal identification systems. Even if they do, they've still got to send people out to go and validate a whole load of information before they can then go back and make a decision. So it's lack of data is one thing, but also the lack of technology is another in order to be able to actually make a decision. It's still a very manual, costly, slow, laborious process to try and administer.
If you had to choose, which would you say is the most challenging aspect in all of that?
I think it depends on a few things, but I think one common thread is trying to come up with a solution that is going to work with our customer. Because we can think up great things that are going to work in our lab. We can think of data sets that are going to be applicable. But we've got to be really mindful of how they operate today and the pace at which they'll be able to evolve. So while we can come up with a really sexy solution, we've got to be able to fit into these mix of maybe part digital, highly manual processes. It's got to be at a cost point that they can work with. When you think about a lot of these emerging markets, the cost tolerance that they can actually
much lower
digest is much lower. So we've got to keep things quite cheap and light to serve that need as well. There's no point coming up with a perfect solution if it's hugely expensive to actually purchase. And even in the financial world, you're moving into, there's a lot of tier 2, tier 3s, informal sort of non-banking lenders. You've got startups that are trying to do lending as well. So you've got to cater for a diverse set of clients as well. So the hardest part, I think, is actually not getting carried away with what sounds like a great solution and is a great solution, but it's only a good solution if you've got a customer that can buy it.
Yeah, because the needs on the ground might be different from what you're used to.
Absolutely, and the challenge there is getting under the skin of clients and helping them understand that we don't have a solution today, but we are working on one, and to gain their trust and ask them as an innovation center to say, hey, tell us how things work so that we can hopefully come with something. Because if we ignore the customers early on, then we are going to be going down a very different path as to what's going to work for them when we have a solution.
Do you find the challenges vary greatly geographically in the region, or are they more or less constant?
They do vary geographically, and I think for us, well, I said we're a regional innovation center. Australia is a big market for Experian. Right. It's our was up until very recently our highest revenue driving market. So we are thinking about how we can build something that is going to scale across the region. That's part of my job as well. Is we can't just form solutions that fit one customer in one niche market. We've got to try and be as sort of scalable and as adaptable as possible across the markets, and then to your point, even within markets, let's say somewhere like India, where the geography changes hugely across the whole country as well. So customer segments are very different. So you're not going to serve everyone's need with one solution, but it's the decisions on which segments do we focus on, and where are the opportunities largest and where are the needs sort of applicable.
Is there any one market that was particularly surprising in that regard?
I'd say not really. I think when I first moved into the role, because I was in Sydney and Australia beforehand, I was very surprised by, I guess, the challenges that were faced in places like Indonesia that I mentioned earlier. But I think when you understand the region a little bit better, you've got a good sense of what exists and what the challenges are. Of course, there's always things that come up that you assumed, especially in an innovation role, you have a whole load of assumptions that in any new project that there's a lot of eye-opening things you learn at the beginning. And sort of my job is to try and get to as many of those as quickly as possible before we go down the wrong path. But yeah, I'd say there's no one area which is particularly sort of more surprising than anywhere else in that sense.
Oh, that's great. And so we're here at Big World Data Conference in Singapore. What do you think about the conference?
It's been great. So it's a very diverse mix of sort of innovation, AI, cloud solutions.
Right, yeah.
So myself and Julien from Co-Creation Lab, who's who works with Experian a lot for our innovation program, we had a sort of Q&A session about sort of how you can use businesses like his to solve innovation problems and part of the process. A lot of really good engagement there from people that are going through a similar experience in the innovation world. But yeah, I really like these sort of events because it's very diverse. You go through a sort of you look through around the stores and you see what they're working on. It's amazing how many little headlines on a screen or something like that will just prick something. And actually, that's quite interesting. Even in places that if you look at the website of these businesses, you might think not relevant, not interesting for us. So that's why I think these sort of things are really good to go to, just talk to people. It's that part of asking people what they do, what are they working on, is always brings out something that is valuable for later on.
Exactly. Get a different angle on what it is they're doing and to set up new connections.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
No problem. Great to talk to you.
Thanks.
Thank you.